of Reimagining Chapel. My name is Amanda Esco, and I am the director of the Religious Education Program here at the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. Thank you for joining us today. I'd love us to begin by lighting our chalice. Do you have a chalice at home? Go grab it. I have my flower pot chalice here, but you can use any type of vessel that you have around you that you want to light a candle in to be your chalice today. But I'd love it if you lit a chalice with me. Now, the intention we're going to set for our chalice lighting today is looking for peace, and our action is through learning. We light this chalice for peace, in the spirit of learning. We gather together in community to learn, to grow, and to serve. Over the next several weeks in Reimagining Chapel, we will be looking at our 6 sources. Now, this week, we're on our second source. Last week, we talked about our first source, direct experience with wonder and awe and mystery in the universe. And that was so much fun. We talked about that in RE as well. But before we get to any of that, I'd love us to get together into this space with a few grounding breaths. Now, I have my singing bowl here. One way that you can do this is by standing up and letting your toes feel the ground. If you can't or don't want to stand up right now, sitting on the ground also will accomplish this. Remember, we know from science that the earth is pushing up on us just as much as we're pushing on the earth. So by connecting our body to the earth, we are feeling its grounding source within us. So let's take 3 grounding breaths. I have my singing bowl here. I dinged it too early. Let's take a deep breath in through our nose. And as I ding my bell, I want you to breathe out. You got me? Okay, let's start. Deep breath in through our nose. Let's do that again. Deep breath in through our nose. Last time. Deep breath in through your nose. While we have been online for these last couple weeks, I've had to lean back again on my spiritual practices to help me ground myself in everything that's happening around me. With working from home and virtual school and needing to be more cognizant of where I'm going once again, I've had to really be thoughtful about my actions within the world. So doing things like breathing, taking a moment to be still, lighting a chalice and setting an intention and how I want to go about that intention are important spiritual practices for me. So as we're going through, I want you to think about what are the important spiritual practices that you need in your daily life to feel grounded, especially in this time that can feel tumultuous to people. Well, another spiritual practice that we like to do is share our joys and concerns. We're not together in person right now, obviously, and we're on YouTube, but I want you to share your joys and concerns with the people that are with you, that love you. I'll be right here waiting for you when you get back. Thank you for sharing your joys and concerns with the people that love you. Now, Miss Lissa is here to share with us our UU of the week. Thank you, Lissa.
Welcome to UU of the Week. I'm Lissa Lander, and I'm the Religious Education Assistant at the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. This week, in Reimagining Chapel, we will learn about our second source of spiritual inspiration, the words and deeds of prophetic people. So, what does that mean? A prophet is a person who can see into the future or speak to the divine. Now, I think that UUs have chosen to lift up the words and deeds of people who have made an impact on our faith and on the future. This includes the words and actions of many people who weren't Unitarian Universalists, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., of course, or maybe the poet Mary Oliver, and so many other people whose words and deeds inspire us. One prophetic voice that did belong to a Unitarian was that of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. He was born in 1807 in Portland, Maine, but at the time of his birth, Portland was still part of, you guessed it, Massachusetts. He became the most notable and influential poet in America in his lifetime. His epic poems like the Song of Hiawatha and Evangeline were so popular they became regarded as American myths that later became part of our culture and our history, even though they were stories that he made up. America was still a very young country, and our achievements in art were not impressing the rest of the world much. Longfellow called for high-quality American literature, which means the books and the poems that we write. To paraphrase a character in his novel Kavanaugh, he said, "We want a national literature that is as impressive as our mountains and rivers. We want a national epic as big as our country. We want a national drama about the gigantic ideas and the amazing activities of our people. In a word, we want a national literature altogether shaggy and unshorn that shall shake the earth like a herd of buffaloes thundering over the prairies." Whew. So, having spent time in Europe, Longfellow knew firsthand that America had a unique landscape and a thrilling new perspective to offer to the world. Not surprisingly, Longfellow became friends with many other notable UUs of the week, including Ralph Waldo Emerson, Louisa May Alcott, and the other transcendentalists that were all kicking around Boston at about that same time. Like them, Longfellow found spiritual inspiration in nature. I think he wished more people would learn from it. In his poem called Nature, he compares it to a mother, and we are her sleepy, grumpy child who doesn't always appreciate what nature has given us. Longfellow wrote about his family more than a few times. He was a devoted husband and father, but his family life was full of tragedy. He was widowed twice and wrote about his sadness when each of his wives died. I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day was a poem and later a Christmas carol, which he wrote about his son getting injured in the Civil War. Now, Longfellow was not terribly outspoken about politics, but he did speak out against slavery and also wished for peace between the North and the South. He frequently used his poetry to remind his readers of cultural and moral values based on Unitarianism, hoping his words would help the nation find its way during a difficult time. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow achieved his goal of putting American literature on the map. He was the most famous poet in his lifetime and is still the only American who is commemorated in the Poets' Corner at Westminster Abbey. Longfellow's words became American history. He made a hero out of Paul Revere when his poem drew national attention to the previously little-known story. His poem, Paul Revere's Bride, was the inspiration for the famous statue of Paul Revere designed by fellow Unitarian and Utah native Cyrus Dallin, which still stands in Boston today. Longfellow's prophetic words about history, the human experience, bravery, and moral values touched the future and still inspire us today as Unitarian Universalists. Thank you for joining me for another exciting UU of the Week, and we'll see you next time.
We are continuing our look at the 6 sources of Unitarian Universalism. Throughout our lives, we are faced with questions that are big, like really, really, really big. How do I know what is right? Am I on the side of justice? What am I becoming? Unitarian Universalism doesn't think that there's just one answer to these complicated questions. Each person is different. Each person has different experiences, privileges, senses of the divine within our universe. One answer isn't simply enough. As Unitarian Universalists, we want each person to be able to search for truth. Our sources are the library books we can look to for the answers to these questions. Let's see if what's in our Wonder Box can hopefully help us on this journey to understand the sources today. Now, it's very light today. Oh, it is a bunch of pictures. There are pictures of bell hooks and Ralph Waldo Emerson and John Lewis and Arius the Heretic. The second source says, we draw from words and deeds of prophetic people, which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. On the surface, this source is pretty simple. It draws from a long line of religious traditions that believe that prophetic people with important, holy, reverent things to say about our lives, are around us. Again, that goes back to the idea that no one has one corner on the truth, that throughout our lives, we can draw inspiration from lots of people. People like Ralph Waldo Emerson and bell hooks and Arius the Heretic. The second part of the text of our second source is the transformational part, I think. Listen to it again. The words and deeds of prophetic people, which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. These aren't simply people who say words that comfort us. They can be, but that's not all they need to do. Our second source calls us to find prophetic people who are working in the world, who are active in combating injustice, living with compassion, siding with love with each of their actions. These are people who often, when it is not easy at all, stand up and say what they think and believe in the world. It goes back to our idea from a couple weeks ago in our main worship service. Our faith calls us into action. These are folks that we can look to as example of people using their voice and spirit in the world to make change. They stand up to people in power to speak their truth in order to bring justice, light, knowledge into the world. They are called by some force within themselves to bring change into our world. So they speak, they write, they form groups and committees, they talk to lawmakers, they protest, and sometimes they get in trouble. Sometimes a lot of trouble. A person who I consider a prophetic voice, the late Representative John Lewis, said, "Do not get lost in the sea of despair. Be hopeful, be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. Never ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble." These prophetic people, troublemakers, sirens of change, have made our world what it is. Our faith calls us into action, and that's exactly what these prophetic people do. They speak the truth to power. They lift up voices who are silenced. They lead with love and justice in their hearts. As Unitarian Universalists, we can look to their words and, most importantly, their deeds to live our faith daily. Our faith, our theology is embodied daily.
It is in our actions. Let us look to the lives of the prophetic people that we know as we build our faith in community. Thank you for joining us once again for another Reimagining Chapel. To find out more information about the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City, please visit us at slcuu.org. Until next time, though, let's heart out.
Each person is important. To be kind in all you do. 3, help each other learn. 4, and search for what is true. 5, all people